A few months ago, I made a theory video where I talked about how Ego is no longer the one in control of Blue Lock, and that there was a mastermind pulling all the strings behind the scenes of what was happening in Blue Lock, from selecting which players would be favored in the NEL to determining the future of all the Blue Lock players before this arc even started, and that this was all being done in the name of money and not what was best for the Blue Lock players. Now, at the time, this theory might have seemed like a bit of a stretch, but with the reveal of a mysterious new character in chapter 248, this has shown me that I was likely correct. So in this video, I basically wanted to take elements from that theory and expand on them to theorize who this person from chapter 248 could be, since I know his appearance has confused some people, and what his intentions are, and how his presence could completely change the Blue Lock story. But before I get started, if you like this video and want to see more Blue Lock content, please consider liking, commenting, subscribing, since anything and everything helps with the channel. Alright, so if you didn't see my original Ego theory, basically to summarize it, I talked about that while Ego is still the face of the Blue Lock project, after the U20 win for the Blue Lock 11, while it seemed like Ego gained more control since he got the entire U20 Japan team, he actually lost most of his control of the project, since once Blue Lock got more global attention around the world and many investors wanted to put money into the Blue Lock project, Ego likely saw an opportunity to make the Blue Lock project even bigger and wanted to have Blue Lock players rapidly develop in a short amount of time for the World Cup, which is how he came up with the Neo-Egoist League. But in order to make the final phase of the project come true, he had to make a promise to the greedy businessmen of Blue Lock and give up a lot of his control. And now there are external influences pulling the strings behind the scenes, which is why there are many new elements in the story, such as the Blue Lock TV being created and the favoritism we have seen for certain Blue Lock players. But I'll expand more on that second point in a minute. So some proof that I used for this theory is from a scene in chapter 210, just before the Ubers versus Bastard match, where we see the Japan Union chairman come in and talk to Ego and Anri. And in that scene, he basically talks about how Ego needs to remember his promise, since he says, "We helped to get BLTV started too. You made us a promise when we gave the plan the thumbs up. Or have you forgotten, Ego?" We see that Ego is visibly annoyed in this scene, and he tells the chairman that he remembers and to leave him alone now, with the scene ending with Anri and Ego not looking happy, and the chairman looking pleased, saying that football is a business after all. Now, this scene could feel a bit random since we are never given context to what this promise was, why Ego and Anri look so upset, and who the chairman was talking about when he said we helped create Blue Lock TV. The only thing that we could possibly have had context to at that point is that the final answer could have been assumed that he was talking about the Japan Football Union. But I think the author intentionally put this chapter just before the Ubers match so that readers wouldn't pay too much attention to it, but giving a hint to what was coming soon within this arc and following arcs, which is why my theory about Ego losing control of Blue Lock came in. And at the time in my theory, I just referred to these mysterious people that have taken over control of Blue Lock as the investors, since Ego himself has already told us about the existence of these people. And I'm not talking about the ones that are investing in Blue Lock players for the NEL bids, but they could be the same people. I'm talking about the investors that are directly influencing the NEL, since the first instance we see of this is in chapter 163 when Isagi was put on the field during the first NEL match with Bachira, even though that went against the established rules for the Bastard team, since Yukimiya even calls out how this was unfair since he had better stats at the time than Isagi, but Noel tells him that it's in his contract to let Isagi play at least one game since he is a fan favorite and the world wants to see him. Then later, Ego farther confirms this by saying how these were the instructions that came from the owners and sponsors, bypassing what what Noel wanted. But it seems we have finally met the leader of the investors and possibly even the new owner of Blue Lock, the mastermind that has been pulling the strings behind the scenes, which is this man right here in chapter 248. I believe this person has invested the most money into the Blue Lock project and has possibly even bought it, which is why he is the one intentionally making choices in the NEL to make sure the viewership stays high so that the money for Blue Lock stays high as well. And to some, it might seem this scene came out of nowhere, but we have been getting tiny hints throughout the NEL about the existence of this person and these other investors, and we're just finally getting faces to these voices. So at this point, some people might be thinking, alright, so these people might be controlling Blue Lock, but is that something to be concerned about or fear them for? Well, yes, because I feel there's a major thing that these investors and this mastermind has already done that has negatively impacted a lot of the Blue Lock players, which has rigged the NEL since the beginning. So what do I mean by that? Well, remember how I said about the favoritism we have seen for certain Blue Lock players? These players that I'm talking about are all the Blue Lock players that played in the U20 versus Blue Lock 11 match, but especially the players that scored goals, which is Nagi, Baru, Rin, Shidou, and Isagi. Since Noel has already revealed that it was specifically put into his contract to have Isagi play at least one match. So who's to say the other master strikers aren't also tied to certain players in their contracts? And this puts the other Blue Lock characters at an unfair advantage before the arc has even started and determine most of their futures before they've even had the chance to prove themselves. Since there's been people complaining about how the author has so many interesting background characters, but almost none of them have been explored in this arc, and we have mostly only been exploring the main characters that we have known from previous arcs with some small exceptions. But this could be explained later on that the investors had already picked most of who was going to make it into the top 23, so the master strikers didn't have to concern themselves about training all the players. Since I'm going to soon do a ranking video of the master strikers as coaches, but an issue I've had with the majority of the master strikers is clearly they favor certain players over others and leave a lot of the Blue Lock players wasting away on the bench, knowing that this is their last chance to be able to represent their country in the World Cup, and this could also be their last chance at being able to take the next steps in going pro. And another reason why I think this could be in their contracts is, for example, with Nagi's downfall, a lot of people have been questioning why wouldn't Chris Prince just not make Nagi the center anymore. And I even talked about this in a previous chapter review, that possibly Chris Prince liked Nagi's flashiness and wanted to keep him as the center since he is so popular, so it'd help him get more exposure. But what if it's in the contract that he has to keep Nagi as the center? Since Nagi came out as a fan favorite from the Japan U20 match, since we even get reminders from different chapters of how popular Nagi is with the public on social media, since even when Nagi has been doing bad, there are still people supporting him, and having a fan favorite removed as the center could upset a lot of people in the Blue Lock world, which could hurt viewership, which is not something the investors would want. So maybe that is why Chris Prince is possibly trying to work so hard to make it work with Nagi, since he couldn't take him off without possibly breaching his contract. Since what Nagi clearly needs right now is a change, since him being the center right now is clearly not working for him, and it could be a position that he just was not ready for at this stage, and something he needed to work up to, but instantly putting him into this role is actually hurting him as a player more than it's helping. And this is what I mean, that if the investors are influencing this heavy in the NEL, then they are looking at things from a money-making angle, since Nagi being the center is good for viewership since people want to see him play. But at this point, the smartest decision would be to make someone else the new center so that Nagi can reevaluate things and work his way back up to the spot. But that wouldn't wouldn't be as entertaining for Blue Lock TV, so I wouldn't be surprised if Nagi has to be the center for views as instructed by this mastermind and the investors. And on another note, Baru, Rin, Shidou, and Isagi could have also been given special treatment in these contracts because they also got a lot of attention from the U20 Japan match. Since I also talked about in the previous ego theory how it was interesting that almost instantly all these players were made into the centers for their teams over the international players that should have realistically been better than them at this point. Since I know likely not all the players came over to do the NEL, but these players still should have been at another level than even the Blue Lock players at this point. So it could be possible that the Master Strikers had to do this. And the only reason why Isagi wasn't made into the center for his team is because a new Gen 11 striker was on the Bastard team and they couldn't place him there without it looking suspicious. But Isagi is still getting favored in other ways since he was getting interviews arranged by the Blue Lock management even before he made his first goal in the Ubers match, since he is Blue Lock's hero and the investors know this. So that's why they push him so much with the public and make sure he's high in biddings. Since that's not to say that Isagi doesn't deserve to be high, but many people have pointed out that sometimes the biddings are confusing and not totally fair, and that's because like any other reality TV show, there are producers pulling strings behind the scenes to make sure that things are falling into place and telling the narrative story that they want, which is why the NEL was rigged from since the beginning, because they already know which players are going to make it, specifically the Blue Lock 11, and not giving the other Blue Lock players a chance to thrive. Which is why I believe that Izaki's first place could already be secured by the end of the PXG match, since they want to build up the story of the hero of Blue Lock rising up to the top at the end. And there could be a future storyline where Isagi learns about the rigging of NEL and feels like he didn't earn his top spot, which would make him have self-doubt about his skills. The only exception to the favoritism of the Blue Lock 11 would be Kunigami, but as we see in the same chapter, Ego has clearly invested a lot into Kunigami and making his body comparable to Noel Noah to see if this is the secret to making the next greatest striker, and he could have talked to the investors to make sure that Kunigami is at least more fairly assessed, since he could have pitched it that he could have possibly found the solution to making the next greatest strikers, but he would need Kunigami to play in the NEL to see these results. But even Kunigami isn't always assessed fairly, since after the Manshine match, he's in 5th place while Isagi is in 4th place, even though Kunigami had 2 goals at this point and Isagi didn't have 1. And we're told that goals matter more than not goals. So it goes to show that the investors in this mastermind are clearly forcing things to go their way no matter what. And to end off this theory video, I believe we are going to see a lot more of this mastermind in the future, and he could possibly finally reveal his presence at the end of this arc, since we keep getting hints about him after each match, from first just being a voice to a whole person now, and he'll finally reveal the plans that the Japan Union chairman has been hinting at. And I believe that these plans will not go over well with the Blue Lock players, since they will be plans that favor money over what is best for the Blue Lock players, since the NEL a lot of the times is being treated more as a produced show to these investors than development for the Blue Lock players, since they could care less about that as long as they make money. And that is when the Blue Lock players will realize they're in a new type of challenge under the control of this new person, and that Ego is no longer the boss of Blue Lock. And we'll likely get to see the faces of these other investors as well, since they will also have a presence in the story. And I also have an other mini theory from my Ego theory video, is that Ryo's dad will actually be one of these investors, since his family company is already sponsoring the event, so it wouldn't be that far of a stretch to believe that once Ryo's dad realized that there is money in the pro football world, he decided to become an investor for the Blue Lock project. since it was very specifically chosen by the author to make it so that it was Ryo's family was the one that provided the ear translation earpieces. And I do think this is a detail that is going to come back into the story, and I believe that this is the way that it's going to come back into the story, with it being revealed that Ryo's dad has been an investor this whole time and also putting a lot of money into this project. Alright, that is all for today. I basically just wanted to revise my previous video, since seeing chapter 248 made me finally be able to put a face to this mysterious person that I had talked about in this theory, and I also wanted to explain to people who were confused by who this was and why he's here, where he could have came from, and who his origin story could be. So hopefully you enjoy this theory video. They're always fun to do, and don't forget to push the post notification button so you don't miss any of my new videos. Anyways, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!